Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by my guy Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we're looking at a Friday night slate to close out the work week here, Nate, with 10 games to choose from. In this one, we're talking about the Sacramento Kings still getting a little bit of disrespect in Detroit. Not a big enough spread. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. Also have another game video and our player props up for you guys, so make sure to like and subscribe to that page. Continue to follow along with us each and every weekday this regular season. Also head to thelines.com. That's where you can get that great written content that we've got for you guys and use our odds finder tool to go ahead and shop those NBA lines across the U.S. sportsbooks. Get the best juice back on all your bets. Nate, let's go ahead and get into this 10-game slate and then talk Kangs and Pistons.
Yep. Yeah, I actually really like this slate. I think there's a lot great to choose from, and this is a good one that you picked out here. We got Hawks -1 at the Hornets. LaMelo Ball's back. Back totals up at 232. We got the Kings -5 at Detroit. Josh mentioned a little disrespect, an extremely high total here, though, at 239. Warriors are +8 at the Sixers. They will be without Steph Curry for some time here. Pacers +8 at the Cavs. Magic +13 in Boston. Not often you're on a 4-game win streak and you're that big of dogs. There's an outside chance Rob Williams debuts for the Celtics. The other game we break down here is a pick'em, Brooklyn at Toronto. Totals at 226. The Knicks looking to beat the Bulls again are +3 in Chicago. The Wolves +1 at the Thunder. Blazers +3.5 at Dallas. And then the Nuggets -1 at the Lake Show. Interesting game there as well. But we are talking the Detroit Pistons, who it just seems like nobody takes seriously. And that I feel like I can chalk up half of their wins to just people being like, oh, Detroit's on the schedule. Let's rest someone or just not play big minutes or just, do whatever the hell we want. Because this is barely an NBA team with Cade Cunningham shut down for the season. I mean, there's some bright spots in terms of, what you see from Jaden Ivey, for sure. Bojan, like we talk about, trying to play his way off of this team. But they are terrible, especially on defense. Last 3, 118 defensive rating. Somehow been scoring 120 a game with a good pace. But you look at the recent meeting in Sacramento, and the Kings win by 8, despite getting outgunned at a 51% rate from the three-point line. And the Pistons are not a team that's going to hit 51% of their threes in a consistent fashion at all. No, they are, I believe, 27th in three-point shooting, 27th in assist-to-turnover ratio, and 24th in efficiency. And the Kings are 5th, 7th, and in those efficiency categories. The Kings are just dealing with a really tough schedule right now. I mean, the only reason they're getting this kind of disrespect is like, well, look at the results. They've had to grind them out. They're still on this road trip. It seemed like they just finished an East Coast road trip like a week ago, and now they're back on the East Coast for 6 more games. Got to be a nice second half for them at some point, but I think we've forgotten how efficient they are. For a while, the number 2 offensive team behind the Celtics before they had to leave Sacramento and play this tough schedule. And De'Aaron Fox wasn't right. And he tried to come back on the front end of the back-to-back against Philly. For whatever reason, it didn't go. But it did click in their last game. And they won a shootout with Toronto. Sabonis, Fox, both looking great. But, I mean, between those guys and Harrison Barnes, they combined to basically shoot 30 free throws on the Pistons the last time out. So, I mean, neither of these teams can protect the rim. I know you're saying you're scared to take it under, even though it's at 240. I wouldn't be that scared based on how high that is. I mean, Sacramento, much less likely to get into that kind of astronomical shootout on the road. But I think they are very likely to win this game. So maybe if you are scared at 238, 239, you tease it up and get rid of that spread, get Sac -1.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not scared of the spread. I think it's disrespectful. I think one team is, very rightly so, a bottom 5 team in the NBA. And I think one team is, potentially a top 10 team in the NBA right now, in the Kangs. I think there's a lot of motivation for them. D Fox coming back in that Raptors game and them winning was huge. I know that everybody in that's lighting the beam for the Kings wanted them to go 3-3 on this road trip. They're 2-3 right now, playing some really tough comp: Bucks, Cavs, Knicks, Sixers, Raptors, all in a row, winning just two of those five there. Which I think they would be okay with. I think they would have rather have beaten the Knicks, and they got pounced by them, but the Knicks look really good, longest winning streak in the NBA right now. They've got a point guard. That's for a different video. But 5 in a row against some tough Eastern Conference teams, and they're finishing it off with the Pistons. Like, you've got to pull it out. You've got to win this game, and D Fox being back, he's going to play in that game. I think Kevin Huerter might come back in that one as well, which really is huge for them in the 3-point category. And if he's back, it does once again scare me even to take an under in 240. I was trying to pick an under in that Pacers Kings game, and it started out with a first quarter that they scored like 52 points, and I was like, yeehaw. And then the rest of the game, I think the total ended with like a 270 something total. So like it could just go off at any moment. The thing that I'm not even really worried about that right now. I'm more worried just like talking about how the Kings are disrespected, right? Like 9-1 straight up when they're listed as a favorite this season, and then 7-3 against the spread, because that spread's never big enough, because they're still not seen as a league contender right now, which is disrespectful. They're winning those games where they are favored by 12.5 points on average, and covering the spread by 8 points a game on average in these games as well. And I think this is ripe for another double-digit victory for them. They do go under on the road. 5-10 to the under on the road, where the games average 227, and that's because they're just not the same offense on the road as they are at home, where they score 123 versus the 113 on the road. Similar defense, and really it's the strength of schedule for them. Like, even if you look at some of the numbers that I'm throwing at you, their strength of schedule is the fifth hardest in the league. The only legitimate team ahead of them is the Mavericks. Everybody else sucks, because obviously if you have a shitty schedule or a shitty record, you're going to be playing higher strength of schedule teams because you're one of those bad teams. But at any rate, like, they're a legitimate team that's playing like on the road, especially Toronto, Cleveland. I just named you all those teams. They've also played Boston, Memphis, the Warriors, and the Heat all on the road, and the Clippers. So they're playing the best comp in the league right now on the road, and they're still 9-6 against the spread, 7-8 straight up against all those teams that I just mentioned there, and a few more as well, some that they played twice. So I think that as soon as I saw that spread, I was like, that's not high enough. And the reason it's not high enough is because it's still the Sacramento Kings. What they did in Toronto was very impressive, and the way that they're winning games by making threes. Huerter, very important for that, but also fast break points, limiting fast break points, getting some second chance points, in the paint with DeMontis and those offensive rebounds, and just getting it and going. But when they're on the road, they're playing that defense to limit fast break points, to limit opponents' second chance points, get a defensive rebound and go. But really, more importantly, they need to get turnovers as well, scoring a ton of turnovers, points off of those turnovers. That also scares me for the under, because Detroit is a young team that continues to turn the ball over, letting their opponents get points off of turnovers. It's like top, they're 10th worst at that, essentially, or 8th worst rather, in terms of allowing that to happen. They've been playing awful at home, have the Pistons 1-4 straight up and against the spread in their last 5, not failing to cover by 6 points. 122 defensive rating, definitely worst, allowing 122 points a game, playing at a pretty slow pace as well. They're unable to stop anybody, only scoring 112 points. So 5.5 points, give me that. I'm happy with all that. I'm not necessarily feeling an under. I just want to be bold and take one, because 240 points is an absurd amount. It's just I don't have the balls for that right now, but that would be my preferred bet on the total.
Yeah, it's not that scary. I mean, you have in here that they're 9-3 to the over at home, the Pistons, but those games are averaging just 230. So, I mean, 239 isn't. I think it's being juked a little bit because what we just saw between the Kings and the Raptors, which is kind of an anomaly we'll address in that Nets Raptors video as well. But otherwise, the Kings have not been playing those kind of games away from Sleep Train Arena, I think it's called. Yeah, I mean, usually it's like a 109, 103 type game. We've seen a bunch on the East Coast road trip. I mean, the Pistons aren't going to be able to stop them. That's what we feel more confident about. That's why we say take the Kings. It's just like the numbers between the lines for the Pistons. It's like they're 1-6 straight up after a win, losing by 8 points per game. That to me says, like, again, people literally shade them out of the calendar instead of circling them. And they're like, oh, we don't have a game that day. And then they're like, oh, the Pistons actually won. And then they come back and they're like, we can do some very basic things to beat this team. And I think Sacramento will be on point in that regard. I think this is the end of their road trip. And they don't really have the luxury after all the gauntlet they faced to just say like, oh, we'll just wax over this one.
100%. Yeah. 3 days off before they have to play the Hornets. Not a team that scares anybody. So it's not really an overlook it game. It's we need this game. We're 15-12 and we've had to dig ourselves out of a really crappy start. So we don't really have the opportunity and the luxury afforded to us to not bring it against the Pistons on the road. Everything that they do, the Pistons do, everything that they do well on defense, Detroit, is sort of defending what Sacramento wants to do well. Not scaring me for Sacramento winning, just saying if you do want the under there at 240, go ahead and hit it. It might get up to like 242, and you might feel like you could wait a little bit as we're recording this pretty late Thursday night with it still sitting at about 239.5, 240, depending on where you find it. So that is all the time we have for you in this one. I can't believe how excited we both were to talk about a Kings-Pistons game, but the Kings got us feeling good right now. So continue to follow along with us. We are coming back with you with a couple of videos as well tonight. So until we see you next, happy betting.